Okay, so good evening, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Terri Sewell. I proudly represent Alabama's 7th Congressional District, and I'm thrilled to be here in Tuscaloosa as a part of my annual Congress in Your Community tour through all 13 counties that I represent in Alabama. Today's visit is an opportunity for me to highlight some of the many ways that our community benefits from vital federal services that are under threat by the Trump administration. Last week, at the direction of President Trump, House Republicans released their 2025 budget proposal, which would cut $4 trillion to programs that Americans rely on in order to give a tax break to the wealthy and the well-connected. While President Trump and Elon Musk claim to be eliminating government waste, we know that this is far from the truth. We know that many vital programs that the folks that I represent and vulnerable communities throughout Alabama need and rely on will be cut. Under House Republicans' proposal, Medicaid alone will be cut by $800 billion. Threats to health care all across America because of Medicaid being cut. These cuts are more than just the statistics. They are about lives and livelihoods. In Alabama, half of all births are covered by Medicaid, and roughly 45% of Medicaid recipients are children. To strip children of their health care while giving tax breaks to billionaires is an outrageous betrayal of our values as Americans, but sadly, it is only the tip of the iceberg. President Trump and Elon Musk also fired more than 1,000 employees at the VA. That's why I visited the Veterans Hospital here in Tuscaloosa this morning to talk not only with the administration there, but also with workers there, so many of whom are fearful of losing their jobs if they haven't done so already. You know, they've proposed slashing food assistance for the hungry, and at a time when housing costs are crushing working families, President Trump has fired the very workers at HUD that would help them find assistance. Their agenda is clear, in my opinion. It seems that this administration and House Republicans, as well as Senate Republicans, seem to be on a crash course towards really hurting fundamental programs that so many Americans depend upon. And so my visit today was a visit not only to the VA, but also to Watley, to Maud Watley Community Health Center. 90% of the funding for Watley Health Center comes from the federal government. And so the threats to health care, the threats to food assistance, to housing, to Medicaid are all threats that are real. And I just want my constituents to understand what's at risk in this budget. So as we enter the 2025 budget negotiations, I want my constituents to know that I will be fighting for these very same programs. I'll be fighting to make sure that we don't see a cut to Medicaid, that we actually see better Medicare services provided. I'll be fighting to make sure that Head Start gets its money and its resources, community health centers, as well as housing assistance. All of those are very important. You know, the common theme throughout today has been that very vital services that vulnerable communities right here in Tuscaloosa rely on are being cut by this administration, and we simply cannot sit back and do nothing. I know that the American people spoke loudly during this election and elected President Trump. And I'm asking President Trump and Republicans in the House and the Senate to work with us so that we can actually do away with fraud, waste, and abuse. All of us. None of us want our government to be inefficient. We all want to make sure that we have an efficient government. But the way to do it is not to slash and burn, but rather to evaluate and make informed choices about what we're doing in order to make our government more efficient. With that, I'll open it up for questions. I'm here to talk about this particular issue, which is the issue of the day, and that's the 2025 budget has not been passed. March 14th will be the next time we all have a vote on the budget. I hope that this president and that House Republicans and Senate Republicans will work with Democrats to make sure that we're doing what needs to be done to be efficient, but to be effective in our government for the people.
Congresswoman Sewell, what message do you have for your constituents, especially the ones here in West Tuscaloosa who have limited limited healthcare, Mod Watley being the only healthcare that, it possibly could be slashed, not in half, but
Yeah.
as you said, 90%.
Yeah. So my message is simple. My message is that public sentiment is everything. And the public needs to understand what's at stake if we continue down this road. And what's at stake is that vital services like Maud Watley Community Health Center are at stake. They receive over 90% of their funds from the federal government. And when that broad freeze memo went out, they were unable to access their portal for 2 days. That's simply unacceptable when you have to make payroll at the end of every week. And so while some of those things have now been corrected, we know that this budget, the only way that the Republicans can get $2.3 trillion worth of cuts in order to justify extending the Trump tax cuts from 2017, the only way that they can do that is to cut much needed vital services. So I want my constituents to be aware. They need to be engaged, they need to be informed, and we will continue to make sure that we're highlighting those services that are at risk.
Can you pinpoint any specific projects in the state of Alabama that are also at risk that people may be familiar with?
Well, I think people are familiar with Head Start. Head Start is a federal program. I think that the folks in Tuscaloosa are very familiar with Watley Community Center because it is the only federally qualified health center in West Alabama. It services not just Tuscaloosa, but Hale County and Pickens County and Sumter County. And so we are really, really dependent upon health care being provided by the federal government. Medicaid affects everyone. $800 billion cut from Medicaid in a state that didn't expand Medicaid like Alabama is a gut punch to the very vulnerable in our society. And I simply will not stand by and not alert the public about what's at stake.
How difficult is it to kind of assure your constituents? It appears and it feels like there's a lot of whiplash going on.
Yeah.
Decisions are made and they're walked back on because the ramifications of them are realized after the fact. How difficult is it maybe working with this administration who appears quick to make decisions without realizing what the fallout may look like?
It's been very, very difficult the last 3.5 weeks to work with this administration. I have a track record of working across the aisle when and where I can. I've done it. I wouldn't be the lone Democrat in Alabama's delegation getting things done without it. But there's a way and a proper way to go about finding waste, fraud, and abuse. And none of us want that in our federal government. We want an efficient government. But the way to do it is not to cut the spigot off without understanding what those programs that are at stake. We need to rid out the programs that are not doing the job that we want them to do. We should not be cutting personnel from the VA. And many of those personnel are actually veterans themselves, losing their jobs. USDA cuts across the board. And so vital personnel are being eliminated as well as important services are being eliminated. And unfortunately, this administration wants to cut everything off and then wait and see what's really needed. And that's simply not a way to run your own personal budget, and it's clearly not the way to run the federal government's budget.
Alabama, I believe, is in the top 10 states that receive the most federal money. Can you paint the picture of what that looks like if we lose all the money that we receive here in the United States?
Yeah, the state of Alabama is definitely a benefit state. We benefit from taxpayer money. We take in more money than we actually send to the federal government. And so when we slash like this, we are slashing much needed funds that the state of Alabama won't have access to. And that's funding for Medicaid. We have a bare bone Medicaid system. You have to be not poor, but po to be on Alabama's Medicaid. And instead of expanding Medicaid and allowing more people to get health care insurance, we didn't do that. And frankly, because we didn't do that, we're seeing hospital closures throughout rural Alabama. And 80% of the hospital closures writ large in America actually occurred the last decade in states that did not expand Medicaid. That's an important statistic. And if Medicaid is cut, which it has to be, there's no way that the federal government the House Republicans and Democrats can, House Republicans and Senate Republicans can actually do a reconciliation. What is a reconciliation? A reconciliation means that they can only give cuts for that which they have the money to do the cuts with. And so all of these cuts that are being made now are to fund this extension of the Trump tax bill. And let me just say, the Trump tax cuts didn't trickle down to the people that I represented. The Trump's tax cuts benefited the wealthy, the well-connected, and the well-off. And those vulnerable communities that I represent did not benefit from it. And now Republicans want to extend it. Trump wants to extend this tax cut for another 10 years. And the only way he can do it is by cutting programs and cutting essential programs like Medicaid and Social Security, Head Start, programs like Meals on Wheels that our seniors depend upon. All of these are federal programs, vital community programs that need to be funded. And I want to make sure that I'm amplifying the voice of the folks that I represent, that that is not the way that we should go about, government. And this is really more chaotic than it is helpful.
One last question. What do you have to say to your constituents who may feel as if their livelihood, the way they get their food, the way, that they work within their lives is hanging in the balance right now, considering that all of this is happening up top,
Yeah.
and they're sitting at home at their kitchen table with the possibility of getting their health care taken from them and their food assistance?
So I want my constituents to know that their Congresswoman feels their pain. I know their pain, and I know that this government is not working for the people. Now, I know we had an election, and we know that this administration won that election. Okay. But I don't believe that the American people knew that they were going to get this kind of chaotic government. And the chaos is really falling on the least of these, not the people who can really brace themselves for such cuts. And it's simply unacceptable. So tonight I look forward to hearing directly from some of these service providers right here in Tuscaloosa that will be affected by any cuts that may happen to our federal budget. And as I said before, the only way that a tax cut can be funded is by cutting essential programs like Medicaid. $800 billion would be cut in order for this $2.3 trillion tax cut for the wealthy to take place. And I want folks to know that public sentiment matters. We saw that when they did away with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the Air Force tried to take away the study of the Tuskegee Airmen from their manual. People rose up, Republicans, Democrats, whites, blacks. This is not just about diversity, equity, inclusion. This is about American history. It's about Alabama history. And we were able to get that reinstated. Likewise, when the initial memo went out, writ large, a freeze memo to freeze all federal funding, people spoke up and spoke out, and they rescinded that memo. We see that they cut USAID, and when they realized that they were cutting aid to poor countries for food nutrition, they reinstated parts of those programs. And so I just want my constituents to be well informed, to be politically engaged, to be civically engaged in what's going on. Their voices matter, and we want to make sure that the voices are amplified. Thank you. Okay.
Do you know what's happening in Birmingham? Download the What's Happening Birmingham app today on Android, iPhone, and iPad for free. Get info on everything you need to know about local news, events, businesses, restaurants, and more. Visit our website, what'shappeningbham.com, or follow us on social media @happeningbham for more information. Download the What's Happening Birmingham app today, your source for everything Birmingham.